Despite federal mandates, the fight continues in Minnesota to keep boys out of girls' sports. Next. Happy to have Renee Carlson here, General Counsel of True North Legal, an initiative of our friends over at the Minnesota Family Council. Good to see you, Renee. You've been very busy over at the Capitol, so we certainly appreciate your time. But in many ways, you guys have been at the forefront of this fight for years now. In fact, it was a decade ago you testified against Minnesota State High School League's policy back then, allowing males in female sports. So just kind of set the scene for us a bit. Is it surprising for you at this moment to, I guess, see this all play out kind of as you predicted years ago?
You're right, Liz. This was about a decade ago that myself and others who were concerned about the Minnesota State High School League's policies testified to these concerns. Back around like 2014, 2015, we testified when the league changed its guidelines to allow athletes who identify as trans athletes to participate on sports based on their gender identity. So as you said, I've been around this for a while, and as we've seen this gender ideology, activism, very progressive in Minnesota, this issue has come to the forefront. And so I'm thankful that the legislature is finally addressing this again after about a decade. And yesterday was just quite an interesting hearing.
Yeah, we're going to get to that powerful testimony here in a moment. And just to set the scene, again, we have President Trump back in the White House. He's obviously been doing a lot just in the last month. Your reaction first to Trump's executive order protecting female athletes, and then similarly, what's it been like? Kind of this head scratching that's been going on. It seems like here going, the pushback in Minnesota to that mandate that we've been seeing play out.
Well, here at True North Legal and the Minnesota Family Council, we are very thankful that President Trump and his administration are going to enforce Title IX with its original intent. Title IX is a federal statute that was really enacted to protect women's opportunities in education, and that includes opportunities in athletics. So simply, President Trump is putting forth, and with his interpretation, the hallmark, the spirit and intent of what this law was intended to do. That is going to have an impact in the states because states cannot not comply with a federal statute. So here in Minnesota, where we have people conflating sex with gender identity, they're going to have a hard time defending their positions with the administration's interpretation of this law. And that's why we have this tension.
And that tension we saw play out on Wednesday. As you said, new legislation has been introduced by Representative Peggy Scott of Andover to protect the integrity of girls' sports and the safety of female athletes. The bill states only female students may participate in an elementary or secondary school athletic team or sport that an educational institution has restricted on the basis of sex to women or girls. The bill was heard in committee Wednesday. We're going to go ahead and just listen to a bit of testimony. Let's listen.
She told me, quote, "I sat behind the 6'4" man serving the volleyball and thought, I could never receive that. My friend is a 6'3" guard. What is the point of girls and boys teams if males can play on girls-only teams?"
This is a privacy issue as well. Athletes share locker rooms, they share showers. I love doing sports in school, and I would strongly encourage any girl to do so as well. But I can say that I would personally be strongly discouraged to do the sport I love to do if I had to compete against someone with an unfair advantage.
Title IX made it possible for girls to have access to athletic opportunities, just as boys have historically had this opportunity. But in Minnesota, male access to female athletics has been prioritized over girls' access and opportunities to their own athletics. This favoritism is inequality for girls.
As a long-distance runner, putting in miles at practice is how I train for meets. This entails preseason training, early morning practices, and after-school practice. What I'm trying to say is it's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. If a male athlete entered a girls' race and stole that experience from me or one of my teammates, I'd be so disappointed. It's an honor for girls to make new records in sports, but it's deceitful and dishonest for boys to steal accomplishments from girls.
Renee, you were the first to testify. There were plenty of people there from both sides, but just your reaction overall to what went on Wednesday.
I thought that this hearing was fantastic, really. The testifiers came and showed the story. Representative Scott started out and she was able to speak to the need to be able to protect female athletes and make clear that, again, this law in Minnesota should operate as it was originally intended, which was the spirit of intent is to make sure that female sports are only for females. And I followed her with my testimony, speaking to not only Title IX and the way that law is going to be enforced and interpreted, but also made clear that there is at least one court that says that this statute, particularly that 120A statutory scheme that we were discussing, has been noted as a counterpart to Title IX in at least one court case. So it's really quite simple. Again, it's just making clear that the spirit and intent of the law that has already always existed was actually, in fact, intended to give female athletes opportunities here in the state of Minnesota. And of course, not just athletes, but with respect to Title IX, like I said, it's an educational opportunity. But this issue specifically that we are working on, kind of chipping away at making clear what the intent of the law is particular to sports.
And what was it like for you? I thought it was so moving to hear from those young, courageous young girls who are saying, we want the opportunity here in Minnesota to play these sports and do so safely. I know you're a mom, but I think at times just listening to them and their stories, you couldn't help but get a little choked up.
Oh, absolutely, Liz. I myself was also emotional. I am so proud of these girls who decided to step forward and to speak truth. I mean, they were giving the practical implications of why this law matters. And so, you can sit in legislative policy debates and, be in litigation. And sometimes it's hard to really understand when you're in the room what the real world impact is. But when you have actual citizens of the state of Minnesota as young as 13, 14, our daughters coming in to say, this is what this law means to me and why this issue is so important, that just takes it to a whole nother level. It really humanizes the issue. And again, these girls made very clear, this is not about a discriminatory intent toward anybody or any person. It's not about personalities or anything else. This is simply about protecting female opportunities. And as one testifier said, if we can't have only girls in girls' sports, then what is this? We just have co-ed teams and men's teams. And that's something that unfortunately the legislature yesterday didn't really get into, but that is the crux of the issue. Again, if female sports are designated for females, then only females should be playing in them.
A couple things that you guys have pointed out. A study conducted by the United Nations found that female athletes have lost nearly 900 medals worldwide to transgender men that are competing in their events. And we heard during the testimony Wednesday that this is a manufactured issue, almost this kind of there's nothing to see here. But what would you say to that, Renee?
Well, the testifiers yesterday proved that this is not a manufactured issue. We had one girl who was 11 that testified who had a broken bone because she played on a team that had to compete against a male athlete. We also had another girl testify to her experience being on a team with a male athlete. So this isn't hyperbole. And of course, we've seen across the country, we have seen, this started with Riley Gaines and Leah Thomas. And then we saw Peyton McNabb, who came forward, who was actually concussed in a volleyball game because a male athlete's power overcame to the point that she was injured. We know that males have more strength. They have that more heart and lung capacity. They are just physiologically altogether different than women. And what was very interesting, Liz, yesterday is we had 4 doctors testify that there is never any chance medically to mitigate the advantages that males have over females, and even at these young ages. So, that's just something that can't be overcome. This absolutely is not manufactured. We have the science, but we have the personal stories as well.
The Federal Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, they've announced it's now going to investigate the Minnesota State High School League. And as far as this bill moving forward, I know there's a lot of questions about this. It seems, Governor Tim Walz, of course, would never allow such a thing here, right? But how do you see this playing out, Renee? Why are these conversations still important? And tell us the best way also that people can get involved.
Well, I think the genesis of this was when the Minnesota State High School League had made some statements about whether or not it would comply with the current administration's interpretation of Title IX. At this point, they've said that they are going to comply with an investigation that the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights has now initiated with the Minnesota State High School League to see if their policies, including their policies with respect to playing on teams based on gender identity, are compliant with the administration's interpretation and understanding of Title IX. We've had courts actually recently say that that interpretation is the Trump administration's interpretation of Title IX has been reinforced by courts recently that have said there are two sexes, male and female, and that is going to be the foundational interpretation of Title IX. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Minnesota State High School League agrees. They have asked for some legal guidance, apparently by the Attorney General in this state, Keith Ellison, who is typically very adverse to our position about protecting female athletes. So in the next couple of months, I expect that this will unfold. We'll have more information about this investigation. And the Minnesota State High School League's initial concern, as stated on their website, was that they think that the Minnesota Human Rights Act, as well as the Minnesota Constitution, gives them some grounds for some conflict, which is really quite amazing, again, because Title IX is a federal statute. So I'm not sure what they're going to find that gives them legal grounds to overcome federal law. But like I said, time will tell. We are definitely tracking with those updates. For people that want updates and just want to know how to get more involved on this issue and even others that we're working on, they can go find us at truenorthlegal.org, at mfc.org, and they can certainly email at info@truenorthlegal.org.
And on Wednesday, this went ahead and did pass out of committee, so we'll continue to follow things at the Capitol. But it's certainly an important time for people to have their voices heard, right, Renee?
Oh, that's absolutely true. And it's been a while since we've seen something pass out of a committee that we're on board with and we agree with. So that, that's an encouraging step. If anything, this bill is an encouragement for all of Minnesota to know that we are headed forward on a path in the right direction.
Renee Carlson, again, General Counsel of True North Legal with Minnesota Family Council. You can check out their work at mfc.org. Good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you, Liz. Thanks for having me.
And that will do it for this episode of Liz Collin Reports. We will see you next time.